first session of the second day of the ELT Summit 2020, organized by International Society of Educational Leadership in association with CU Shah University, Vadhavan City, PP Savani University, Surat, Tolani Commerce College, Gandhidham, and ELT Pune chapter. As we all know, the contemporary global landscape has encouraged us to use virtual platforms of knowledge creation. This is indeed an opportunity to convert adversity into opportunity. And we are trying to do our best in the same direction in this summit. We all relish the scholarly presentations on the first day of the ELT Summit 2020 yesterday. Let's embark on the second day of the summit with more scholarly presentations by eminent professionals in the field of English language teaching. Our first erudite speaker of the day is none other than Dr. Patil. Dr. Patil is a renowned scholar and retired professor from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He's guided many MPhil and Ph.D. research projects and has contributed with high-quality research work in the field of English language teaching and linguistics. He's been an emeritus professor. He's a founder member of the international organization called English Scholars Beyond Borders. He worked as a senior English language advisor in Vietnam and Japan for 7 years. He's delivered invited and sponsored key talks in 25 countries. He is the president of ELT Pune chapter, and our Pune chapter has flourished under his able guidance. It is indeed our privilege and honor to have you as the first plenary speaker, sir. I humbly request, sir, to address the audience and enlighten them on the topic, Changing Paradigms of English Language. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you for a very elaborate introduction. I don't know whether I deserve that kind of introduction, but thanks a lot.
You do, sir.
Good morning, friends, and welcome to this international conference on a very important topic as far as the teaching and learning of English are concerned. Now, I'm going to address a few shifts in paradigms. I'm going to talk about, let's say, 8 to 10 paradigm shifts. And whatever I'm going to say as far as these paradigm shifts are concerned will have implications or repercussions for curriculum design, syllabus framing, materials writing, teaching, learning, assessment, and feedback. So I'm going to say a few things, and I'm going to say some very simple things about 8 to 10 paradigms. And as I said, whatever I'm going to say over the next 30-35 minutes will have repercussions or implications as far as the curriculum designing process is concerned, syllabus framing process is concerned, materials production is concerned, teaching, learning, assessment, and feedback are concerned. Now, let me begin with Kachru's three-circle, idea. Now, Kachru describes English in terms of three circles, and these three circles are concentric circles. The innermost circle is the inner circle, and you will ask me, so which countries fall under this umbrella of the inner circle? Well, the inner circle comprises countries where English is the first language. English is a native language. English is a mother tongue. And these countries are United Kingdom, United States of America, Australia, New Zealand, and so on and so forth. The next circle is the outer circle. And the outer circle consists of countries like India, Singapore, Kenya, and Sri Lanka, and so on and so forth. And the last circle, the third circle, is the expanding circle. Now, it is quite possible that countries which are now in the expanding circle will move to the outer circle. So there is a lot of traffic between expanding circle and outer circle. And of course, the inner circle remains constant. Now, English spread from the inner circle countries like the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia, and New Zealand to the outer circle countries. And, it has lots of repercussions or implications as far as English, the nature of English and the function of English is concerned. Now, when English moved from the inner circle countries like the United Kingdom and the United States and Australia to the outer circle and the expanding circle, something very interesting happened. And it's still happening. It's happening even today. Now, what is it that's happening? Now, the perceptions about or of these non-native varieties of English are changing. Initially there was a lot of resistance. Initially people didn't accept Indian variety of English or Vietnamese variety of English and so on and so forth. So these new varieties of English, these non-native varieties of English were described as contaminated varieties, polluted varieties, corrupted varieties, deficient varieties, non-standard and substandard varieties. But gradually, as time progressed, people began to realize that these varieties are going to be there forever. And these varieties are going to dominate the global scenario. So people began to accept the existence of these non-native varieties. They began to recognize these varieties, and they, in fact, they legitimated these varieties slowly, gradually. So we began our talk with the idea of three circles and with the idea of the expansion of English, the spread of English. And we also talked about, I also said a few things about how these new varieties or non-native varieties were perceived and are perceived even today. Now, this raises a very important question. Who are the owners of these varieties, or who are the owners of English? Some people say, okay, only the native speakers are the owners of these varieties or these Englishes. And some people say non-native speakers are also owners of these varieties. So it's not just the native speakers who own these varieties, it's also the non-native speakers who own these varieties. So it's both the native speakers and the non-native speakers who are the owners of these varieties. Now, let me start talking about the shifts in the paradigms. Now, the first dichotomy that I'm going to talk about very briefly is the dichotomy between errors and deviations. Now, I'll try to explain the difference between the two in a minute or two. So you see, I was in Vietnam for about 3.5 years, and I was amazed by that variety of English, which was prevalent in that country. And I, collected a lot of data, which I later used in the form of a book. I got a couple of books published in Vietnam. So let's look at these sentences. I saw a girl beautiful. This is an example of Vietnamese variety of English. Not the standard variety of English that is available there, but beginner, learner variety of English. So I saw a girl beautiful. I'm going to market fish. In fact, what the learner wants to say is, I saw a beautiful girl and I'm going to fish market. But instead of saying that or saying these two things, the learner says, I saw a girl beautiful and I'm going to market fish. I saw a girl carried a basket of flowers. Now, this happens in that variety of English in Vietnam because the Vietnamese language interferes with the acquisition or with the learning of the other tongue. So in Vietnamese language, an adjective follows a noun. So it's not beautiful girl, it's girl beautiful. It's not fish market, it's market fish. And they don't have relativization in Vietnamese, and that's why they delete or they don't use the relative pronoun. And therefore they say, I saw a girl carried a basket of flowers. I saw a girl in standard variety of English, in the so-called standard variety of English, we say, I saw a girl who carried a basket of flowers. Now, I'd like to cite some examples from Nissim Ezekiel's well-known poem, Goodbye Party. Now, here are a few sentences. You are all knowing Miss Pushpa is smiling and smiling. Miss Pushpa is coming from very high family. My friend's wife was cooking very nicely. Her father was a renowned advocate. Pushpa is always saying yes, and Miss Pushpa will do summing up. Once only I stayed in Surat. Now, when the poet Nissim Ezekiel uses these examples or these lines in the poem, Goodbye Party, they become examples of deviation because the poet has mastered English. He is not a beginning learner. He is not a new learner. So when we talk about these lines, or we say that these are deviations as far as the use of these expressions by the poet is concerned. But if the same things, if the same deviations are used by a beginning learner, we describe them as errors. So when these patterns are used by a creative writer, they are described as deviations. When they are used by elementary and intermediate learners, they are described as, or they are seen as errors. Now, I'll try to cite some examples of deviations from Wordsworth. You know, in that famous poem, Daffodils, Wordsworth uses certain lines, and these lines are as follows. 10,000 saw at a glance. Now, we're looking at the word order used by the poet in these lines. 10,000 saw at a glance, the waves beside them danced. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought, and then my heart with pleasure fills. Now, when we look at these lines closely, we realize that the word order is different. It's not a normal word order. It's not a prosaic, usual word order. But we can't describe these as mistakes, as errors committed or made by the poet, because the poet is a native speaker of the English language. So these can be described as deviations. So what I'm trying to say is that, and please remember what I said right at the beginning, that whatever I'm going to talk about, will have implications for so many things, curriculum design, syllabus framing, materials production, teaching, learning, assessment and evaluation and feedback. So when we deliver our goods in the classroom, or when we prepare materials, we need to keep all these paradigms at the back of our mind. Right. So the idea of error and the idea of deviation is very important, and we need to keep that in mind before we start doing our job. Okay. Now, the second thing, I have already said a few things about the difference between errors on the one hand and deviations on the other hand, and we need to keep these distinctions in mind while doing our job as materials writers or teachers or evaluators. The second dichotomy is the dichotomy of comprehensibility and intelligibility. Now, what exactly is the difference between comprehensibility and intelligibility? Let me give you some examples. Once I was conversing with a German lady professor. She was in Pune, and we were talking about certain ideas. We were trying to exchange a few ideas, and this is what she said. Professor Patil, your ideas are the yellow of the egg. No, I didn't understand what she meant to begin with, but later on, I realized, I understood what she meant. So what she meant was, my ideas were brilliant. Since the yellow of the egg is brilliant, it's golden, it's shining, the meaning is that the ideas were brilliant. Your ideas are the yellow of the egg. You were very pregnant in your answer. Again, I was taken aback by the use of the word pregnant in this particular sentence. But what she meant was that, my answer was very precise, was very pointed. So yellow of the egg means brilliant, and pregnant means precise or pointed. So these are examples of incomprehensibility. I couldn't comprehend what she was trying to say to me because I was not familiar with these, with the use of these translated expressions which were, transferred from German to English. Then in our country, we come across people, occasionally we come across people who say, I'm a small radish from an unknown garden. And you will find such sentences in Khushwant Singh's novel, Train to Pakistan, or Mulkraj Anand's novels like Untouchable and so on and so forth. I'm a small radish from an unknown garden. What's your good name? Where does your wealth reside? Now, what I'm saying is that these utterances are not comprehensible to foreign learners or foreign speakers in the English language. So this is what I mean by comprehensibility, that we understand each and every syllable, each and every word or phrase or clause or sentence, but we don't understand the content. We understand the language, but we don't understand the content. So these are examples of comprehensibility or incomprehensibility. Now let me say a word or two about intelligibility. Intelligibility refers to the inability or ability or inability, Intelligibility refers to the ability, and unintelligibility refers to the inability of the speaker to articulate certain sounds. You know, I was in Vietnam and I was amazed by and at the new variety that I was face to face with there in Vietnam. For example, one day one of my students came to me and said, "Professor, I'm going to die with my girlfriend. Would you like to join us?" So, you know, I was given a little jolt because I didn't understand what he was saying initially. So he said, "I'm going to die with my girlfriend. Would you like to join us?" What he was trying to say was, "I'm going to have a dinner. I'm going to dine with my girlfriend. And would you like to join us?" But this is what he said. So, and then I moved to Vietnam, moved to Japan as a senior English language advisor. And one day I was having lunch with one of my colleagues and he said, "Professor Patil, would you like to have more lice?" Now he wanted to say the word rice, but he ended up saying it as lice. Now, this happens because many Japanese learners find it very difficult to articulate the sound R, and their R is replaced by L. So rice becomes lice and room becomes loom and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean by unintelligibility. So we need to keep in mind, or we need to keep these things at the back of our mind when we teach, when we assess, when we produce materials, when we evaluate, when we design curriculums and syllabuses and so on and so forth. So the first dichotomy was the dichotomy between errors on the one hand and deviations on the other hand. The second one that I briefly spoke about is the dichotomy between comprehensibility and intelligibility, or incomprehensibility and unintelligibility. And these dichotomies are very important. Right. Then we need to keep in mind the dichotomy or the difference between form and function. Now, in the past, when I was a schoolboy, my teachers used to teach only the form. I'm not trying to say that they never were concerned about meaning. They were equally concerned about meaning or with meaning, but their main emphasis, their main focus, their thrust was on the form. I'll try to give a couple of examples from phonetics and phonology and from grammar and from other domains of language teaching. You know, the English language has 26 letters. There is one alphabet, and that is English alphabet, and the alphabet consists of 26 letters, right? A to Z. Let's look at the first letter of the English alphabet, and the first letter of the English alphabet, of course, is A. And let's look at the following utterance. "The fat father narrated the tale of the fallen angel." Now, when we look at this utterance, we realize that the letter A has been used in this sentence how many times? Fat, 1, father, 2, narrated, 3, 4, tale, 5, and fallen, 6, and angel, 7. So the letter occurs in this utterance 6 to 7 times. And each time it's different in terms of pronunciation. So the form is the same. The letter A is the form. And the functions are different, but the functions are different. In the word fat, it is pronounced as A. In the word father, it is articulated as R. In the word narrated, it is pronounced as once and A the second time. And in the word tail, it is again A. In the word fallen, it becomes O. And in the word angel, it's again A. So this is a very rudimentary, very simple example of the difference between form and function, that the form is the letter A and the function is those different sounds, A, A, O, and A. These are the functions. Now let me cite an example from grammar. Now we sometimes tend to believe or tend to assume that all interrogative sentences are, utterances are questions, but it's not true. Not all interrogative sentences or utterances are questions. Now, for example, let's look at this. Why don't you close the door? Now, formally speaking, from the formal point of view, this utterance is an interrogative utterance. It starts with the word why and it ends with the question, with a question mark. So it's interrogative. the form is interrogative. But the function, it can have 5, 6, even 9, 10 functions, depending on the context into which it is embedded. So why don't you close the door? It can be a blame, it can be an order, it can be a request, it can be a suggestion, it can be a threat, or it can be a reminder. So the form remains the same. There is only one form, but there are several functions, right? Now let me give you one more example. Let's look at the sentence, the door is open. The door is open. There are only 4 words in this sentence, in this utterance. The is the definite article, door is a noun, and is the verb. In this case, it's a main verb, and open is an adjective. So this is the form, but it can have several functions. For example, suppose there is a hot argument between 2 people, and one of them says to the other, the door is open. The meaning is get lost. You can leave now. Or it can have other meanings like for example, let's say Xi Jinping visits India and says, oh, India is incredible. India is a beautiful country. Mr. Modi may say, the door is open, meaning you're welcome. Or it may mean if there are 2 intruders, if there are 2 infiltrators talking, 2 terrorists talking on the border between India and Pakistan, the door is open, means let's intrude, let's encroach, let's infiltrate. So get lost, you're welcome, let's intrude, we need to seal the border. Suppose Imran Khan and Mr. Modi are talking about the border issue, and they're talking about the traffic that happens, the illegal traffic that happens between the 2 countries. One of them can say, well, the door is open, what can we do? The door is open. That is, we need to seal the border. Or it can have the meaning, doors have eyes, just as we say walls have ears, doors have eyes. Or it can mean, please close it. So what I'm trying to say is that in the case of the example that I cited from the alphabet and phonology, the form is 1, A, but the functions are 5, 6. Different functions are there. In this case, or in the case of why don't you close the door, the form is 1, but this single form performs 5, 6, or even more functions. Now, in the case of the door is open, again, it depends on the context. So context has to be borne in mind before we start doing our job as materials writers, as evaluators, as teachers, whatever role we have adopted. Right? Okay, now the next dichotomy is the dichotomy between interference and intervention. Interference, in my opinion, is a negative term, negative word. Intervention, on the other hand, is positive. Now, people believe that there is a lot of interference, right? The mother tongue interferes with the other tongue, with the acquisition or with the learning of the other tongue. So interference is negative in connotation. For example, in English, we have prepositions. In Marathi, we have postpositions. In English, we have SVO pattern, but in Marathi, we have SOV pattern. In English, we use present perfect progressive when we talk about something that happened, that started happening some time ago and is still happening and is likely to happen for some more time. So we use present perfect progressive. But in our languages, in our variety for that matter, and our languages, we use present progressive. English has articles, we don't have articles. English has 3 sounds like j and z and zh. For example, justice or judgment, and zoo or zero or zebra or zenith or zigzag, and pleasure, treasure, measure. So English has 3 sounds, j, z, and zh. We have in Marathi j, jharyacha, and j, jahadacha. So what happens is when our learners try to speak in English, they transfer these sounds from Marathi or from other languages to English. And therefore, they end up saying words like, I went to the zoo, or it's my pleasure. So that is why people talk about interference of the mother tongue with the other tongue. Now, let me give you some examples of intervention. Please remember, these dichotomies are very important. right? So the dichotomy between error and deviation, the dichotomy between comprehensibility and intelligibility, or incomprehensibility and unintelligibility, the dichotomy between interference and intervention. Now, Chomsky talks about language universals. We all know that there are, almost every language, we don't know all the languages, but I suppose every language has content words and structure words. So there are lots of similarities across languages, right? English has 44 English sounds or phonemes. Only some are different as far as our mother language or Marathi is concerned. For example, th in English is different from th in Marathi. Th, the, z, and r. These and maybe one or two more sounds are different from the sounds that we have in these two languages, right? But the rest of the sounds are very similar. For example, p, b, t, d, k, g are very similar. F and v may be slightly different, right? Because our f and our v in Marathi is bilabial, whereas in English, f and v are labiodental sounds. So what I'm trying to say is that about interference. Yes, interference is there, but there are more similarities than differences. So why don't we start talking about intervention? Intervention helps us acquire languages or learn foreign languages. So this is one more dichotomy. Then the next one is the dichotomy between accuracy and appropriacy. Now we are all obsessed with accuracy. We want our learners to speak correct English, to use correct pronunciation, to use proper words in proper order, and to use correct, grammatically acceptable sentences when they start talking. Yes, fair enough, good enough. But in my opinion, what is more important in a situation like ours, where English is not a first language, where English is not even a second language, where English is a third language or a foreign language. So what is more important in our situation is appropriateness, right? Like once I was in Chennai and one of my former students saw me from a distance. And the moment he saw me from a distance, he started running towards me, rushing towards me. And he came and said, he was almost breathless. He said, "Oh, sir, I'm so happy to see you. Sir, think of the devil and the devil is there." Now, I wouldn't have minded, I wouldn't have minded any pronunciation mistakes or whatever. His pronunciation was impeccable, perfect, right? He was using the expression, think of the devil and the devil is there, in an accurate manner. But was it appropriate? No, it wasn't. Because I was his teacher once upon a time and he was my student. And I didn't expect him to say this when he was talking, while referring to me. So I would have been happy had he said, think of the angel and the angel is there. So this is what I mean by appropriateness. In my opinion, appropriateness should be prioritized over accuracy, over fluency, over other factors or other objectives. Let me give you one more example of accuracy versus appropriacy. So suppose there are two letters. Letter 1 has been written in impeccable English. There are no mistakes of spelling, no grammar mistakes, and there are no mistakes of collocation. It's a perfectly written letter as far as the English language is concerned. But the tone is very nasty. The tone is very impolite and discourteous. The tone is arrogant. This is the letter that we have on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a letter which has some mistakes of spelling, some mistakes of grammar, and some mistakes of collocation, and even some mistakes of punctuation, and so on. But the tone is very polite, very courteous, very humble, very modest. Which one would you prefer? If you ask me, I would prefer the second letter. Okay, it has some mistakes, but the tone is very good. So in my opinion, appropriateness is more important than accuracy. Okay, then the next dichotomy, the next shift is in terms of bookish English and plain English. There has been a shift. My teachers used to use, or they used to speak bookish English, in the sense they were taught English through Shakespeare and Dryden and Johnson and Pope and so on and so forth. And that's why they spoke in a bookish fashion. But we know that bookish English is dead English. Living English is plain English, simple English. And these days we prefer plain English, simple English to bookish English. Now, once one of my friends lost his mother, and I wrote a condolence message to him.
Excuse me, sir, you have, hello, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. You have 2-3 minutes more.
Okay, I'll try to conclude. Okay, he said to me, I left no stone unturned, but as bad luck would have it, the hand that rocked the cradle kicked the bucket 60 days ago. So what he wanted to say was, I did whatever was possible for me, but unfortunately I couldn't save my mother. She passed away. I lost her, a couple of months ago. So this dichotomy between accuracy and appropriateness has to be borne in mind. The other dichotomy is the dichotomy of norm borrowing and norm creating varieties. We have so far, been borrowing norms from Britain and America, but now we have started generating or creating our own norms. And now we have started saying that Indian variety of English, there is some disturbance there. So we have started saying that our own variety can generate norms. So I'll just mention the remaining shifts. There is a shift from imported materials to indigenous materials. There is a shift from use of fabricated materials to the use of authentic materials. And there is a shift from native speaker teacher preference to preference for non-native speaker teacher. And I'm not going to go into details since our time is almost over. And the next dichotomy is the dichotomy between isolation, teaching in isolation, and teaching in context or contextualization, right? Then we also talk about teacher-centric classroom interaction and learner-centric classroom interaction, right? So let me recapitulate what I said very hurriedly, in fact, because we didn't have time. So I said that these dichotomies have implications for so many things. And I mentioned those things right at the beginning. And I said a few things about 3 circles and the spread of the English language from the inner circle to the outer and outer to expanding circle. And I said a few things about ownership. And then I discussed very briefly different dichotomies between errors and deviations, comprehensibility and intelligibility, absolute intelligibility and comfortable intelligibility, form and function, meaning and message, and interference and intervention, accuracy and appropriacy, bookish English and plain English, norm borrowing variety and norm creating variety, imported teaching materials and indigenously created teaching materials, fabricated materials and authentic materials, native speaker teacher and non-native speaker teacher, teacher-centric classroom and learner-centric classroom, teaching in isolation and teaching in context. And one last one that I would like to mention is bland teaching and blended teaching, right? And we can also talk about summative assessment and formative assessment. In the past, it used to be summative assessment, one-time assessment, but now we talk in terms of formative assessment. Summative assessment is like an arranged marriage. The boy and the girl come together once and they decide whether to get married or not to get married. They don't try to understand each other over a period of time. But formative assessment is very similar to love marriage. People, the boy and the girl come together and meet each other several times. They try to understand each other's temperament, disposition, and so on and so forth. And then they may decide to get married, or they may decide not to get married. So these dichotomies are examples of shifts that we have shifted from one to the other. And these shifts matter a lot because they have, as I said, implications for curriculum design, framework, syllabus framing, teaching, learning, evaluation, assessment, and feedback, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I had to rush. I had to hurry up, hurry through because we didn't have enough time. Now the floor is open for questions and answers. I'll try my best to answer questions if there are any. We have about 10 minutes, Lena?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Initially I thought that I had 45 minutes, but then it's fine. I thought I was supposed to speak for 45 minutes and question answer time was extra in addition to that. That's the reason why I had to rush through. Sorry for that.
Thank you for making us understand the difference between various dichotomies leading to the paradigm shift in the English language teaching, sir. Let's look at the questions.
Yeah.
There is one question from Mr. Santosh Kumar. Is there any remedy to minimize the interference of mother tongue in English while teaching?
Okay. Now, I briefly explained the distinction between interference and intervention, and I said that interference is a negative term, whereas intervention is a positive one. Now, one good way to minimize or to reduce the interference of the mother tongue with the other tongue is to find as many similarities as possible. So we need to focus on intervention. We need to focus on similarities, and we don't have to worry so much about dissimilarities, because as Chomsky, and I mentioned him during my talk, as Chomsky said, there are language universals, that all languages have certain qualities, certain characteristics which are similar, and we need to build our teaching edifice, or the edifice of our teaching, pedagogical edifice, on the basis of similarities rather than on the basis of differences. We can carry out a comparative analysis, a contrastive analysis of the two languages, the mother tongue and the other tongue. And we can find similarities, we can find dissimilarities, and we can build our teaching pedagogy or our methodology, our strategies, our techniques on the basis of the similarities. So that, in my opinion, is one good way, one easy way to minimize the interference of the mother tongue with the other tongue. We need to identify, then classify, and then notify, and then rectify, and finally solidify the similarities. We don't have to worry so much about differences. I suppose I have answered the question.
Thank you, sir. The second question is from Dr. Atul Patil. What are your views on the shift from classroom teaching to online teaching during this pandemic period, and what are your suggestions for new teachers and learners who are trying to adapt to the change?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, we're talking about, let's say, virtual teaching in the context of the pandemic, right?
Yes.
So we can talk about the use of technology use of technology under normal circumstances. That's one thing. Now, presently we are talking about the use of technology, use of virtual classroom interaction or online teaching in the context of this pandemic, COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Now, just this morning, I was going through the Marathi newspaper, and there is a headline that says, online teaching is turning out to be expensive for parents and expensive for teachers because it involves expenses. And the other point that is made by that author, the writer of that article, is that when we talk about online teaching, we are being elitist in the sense, yes, online teaching is all right in terms of or with reference to metropolitan cities. It's easy for us because we are in Pune. Imagine a situation where you are supposed to go to a remote place to teach, to use online teaching in an ashram school, ashram shala. What will you do? So there are advantages. Yes, online teaching is okay during the pandemic, but it cannot be a permanent phenomenon. We can occasionally use online teaching, you know. Please remember, let's keep in mind the fact that too much of everything or too much of anything is bad, and the element of surprise is gone. If you use virtual teaching every day, what will happen is people will lose interest in virtual teaching. It will become a routine. It will become a ritual. So let's not make it a ritual. As far as the pandemic period is concerned, yes, we have no other choice because there are threats involved in face-to-face interaction. But under usual circumstances, I don't think it's a good idea to depend heavily on online teaching. there are costs, there are disadvantages, there are handicaps. Thank you.
There's one question from Kritika Sharda. How can we help make learners understand the importance of speaking correct English?
As I said in my talk, I'm not very happy with this obsession that many teachers have with accuracy. Now, you must specify the level. If you're talking about the teaching and learning of English at the elementary level, at the primary school level, or the middle school level, then I would say, please don't worry about accuracy. Worry for fluency, confidence building, right? In my opinion, the three main objectives of teaching English in our situation are, and the sequence is very important, are building confidence, instilling confidence in the learner. So I want my learners to be confident users of the English language. I want them to be able to use English appropriately, fluently, and finally accurately. Accuracy is important, but it should be given a back seat, because what many teachers do in their classrooms is they continue, they leave no opportunity, they leave, to use that expression, they leave no stone unturned to point out the mistake committed or error committed by the learner. Now, if you point out mistakes all the time, what will happen is the learner will feel demotivated, demoralized. So let me first to use English appropriately, fluently, and finally accurately, right? So there are many ways of enhancing accuracy. If you're talking about teaching of English and about the teaching of English and the learning of English at a slightly advanced level, then yes, I will say now your learner is already confident. Now he or she is in a position to use English language in both written and spoken form quite confidently, fluently, appropriately. Then you should move your attention, you focus your attention on accuracy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Time is almost over. It is rightly said that when you listen to great achievers, some of their brilliance rubs off you. I'm sure everyone present here has experienced a similar feeling while listening to sir. Thank you very much for the enlightening session, sir, and for inspiring us and making us understand the various nuances of language teaching. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and sorry for the misunderstanding about the duration of the talk. So, thank you. Thank you so much.
We should apologize for lack of clarity.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yes, I thank you, sir, on behalf of all the participants.
Thank you, and thank you for the
questions. Yes, sir.
The questions were very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.